Good afternoon and welcome to IAM Online for September. If you're just joining, we appreciate you being here with us this afternoon. My name is April Motley and I'm the communications lead for InCommon and your host for our mostly monthly webinar series. This is the Purdue University's IAM Modernization Story webinar. We thank you again for joining today's IAM Online, which is the monthly webinar series focused on identity and access management, brought to you by InCommon and Internet 2. As we get underway, I want to make you aware of our agenda this afternoon. We'll have our welcome, our introductions, our main presentation, some time for Q&A, and then I'll be back to close us out. A few reminders. We will be taking questions and comments live during this afternoon's webinar using Zoom Q&A. So please send those questions during the presentation because we do want this to be interactive, but we will be taking questions following the presentation using the Zoom Q&A function. You can also feel free to post messages in the chat. And also we will be recording this webinar. If you signed up for IAM Online, you will receive a link to the recording via email as well as the slides. It'll also be posted on the InCommon website and on our YouTube channel. With that, I want to let you know our moderator this afternoon is Sharice Arrowood. She is Executive Director for Business Development at Unicon and InCommon Catalyst. And joining her is our speaker, Mandy Witkowski, Director of Identity and Access Management at Purdue University. Once again, we will be recording this afternoon's presentation, so you will be receiving that via email. And we will be taking questions using the Zoom Q&A function. With that, I'm happy to pass the virtual podium over to your moderator, Sharice Arrowood, to introduce today's presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, April. All right. Well, wonderful. As April said, I'm Sharice Arrowood with Unicon, and then with me today, the exciting speaker, Mandy Witkowski. So we're very excited to hear about Purdue University's IAM modernization. I'd like to go ahead and actually get us started with the agenda for the session today. So you're going to hear about the beginning. What does that really mean? That's a little bit of the preface prior to the actual IAM project. What got them going? Where was the real need as to why we need to modernize an IAM? So you're going to hear from Mandy on that. She'll talk about recovery, which I think was a really interesting segment to share. Probably some unexpected and some expected things, but that's a great topic. So get ready to take some notes. She'll then shift into the IAM modernization, getting started and what that looks like before you dig into the meat of the project. She'll talk about maybe some of the growing pains, right? How you had to change as you're moving towards this modernization and what it requires. And then we'll hear about the challenges, probably expected and then some unexpected, so hold tight, along with a celebration of successes and then what's next for Purdue University in the future. All right, so here, before I hand it over to Mandy, what we really want you to think about is IAM modernization is huge. Identity and access management, there's so much involved. First thing that people usually think about is the technology, right? Oh, SSO, MFA, provisioning, deprovisioning, all the support tickets that come in. But really what we want you to do is step back, be a little bit more strategic initially as you listen to Mandy and the Purdue success story. It's really about the people, process, and tools and how that all works together. And Mandy's going to share about that. So we're going to kick it off, as I mentioned, with really the beginning. So Mandy, can you talk to us a little bit about what was the real need and why did you make the decision to actually move forward with a modernization project for IAM?
So there you go. I think the cartoon says it all, right? And the one thing I love about this talk is it's almost like group therapy for people because we all live this. We all understand what it's like to have that critical component, that tiny little piece down there that everything is resting on, but it's so fragile. So the brief history of identity at Purdue is it's very custom. The major components were created decades ago. And then we bolted processes on over the years. Each was driven by a very specific purpose. And we have never had the opportunity really to stop, take a step back, look at the entire picture, and start over, basically. I like to call it my Rube Goldberg Winchester Mansion, because it's convoluted and clunky, and we just keep building and building and building, and we never stop. Added to that, there's no documentation on anything. And it's a very hard environment to learn. It's very hard to support. And it takes really exceptional problem solvers who know about a lot of things to be able to support this environment that we have today. The other things I wanted to touch on, just to sort of set the stage, are the trends in higher ed about budget cuts and hiring freezes for years, and not having the staffing to be able to even keep the lights on, really. And then the pandemic hit, and that completely changed the job market. And, you know, some good, some not so good. And so that sort of sets the stage for when I came in, when I joined the team. So my history is I worked in various IT and management positions at Purdue Fort Wayne. It's a regional campus, for 20 years. And then my group, along with some others, was consolidated with Central IT at the main campus in West Lafayette in May of 2020. And so over time, because of budget cuts and the inability to backfill positions, the support of that environment and all of the organizational changes sort of took its toll. And 4 of my 5 engineers left in the space of 9 months. And so what I was left with was one very competent Active Directory engineer in February of 2021, but obviously that doesn't support this type of environment. Next slide.
So Mandy, talk to us a little bit about how you really moved forward, and how did Purdue really prepare for what's to come?
Yeah, so as you can imagine, 2021 was just firefighting, right? We had lost a huge majority of the staff. Fortunately, I was able to hire contract engineers. That was my first experience with Unicon of, OMG, I need someone to do single sign-on integrations. My AD engineer doesn't do that, so I need help. And I was fortunate. I was allowed to have the funding to do that. I was also allowed to backfill and even add positions over the next couple of years. I always say never waste a good crisis. And if you can learn anything from this, hopefully you'll take away, don't let it get to the point where you are in crisis. But honestly, if you find yourself in that mode, don't waste it. See what you can get out of it. So then late 2021, we did do an assessment with Unicon. That was a multi-week engagement where we met with various stakeholders from all of the different campuses. We talked about what was working well, what was not working not so well. And it was an opportunity for me and my staff, all of which were brand new, to get a quick total immersion in how the campus viewed us and our services. And it was clear that they were not getting what they needed, and that the relationships had degraded over time. So that sort of set the stage to, okay, something has to change. We need to do something here. So 2022 then was mostly spent on building stability, just getting to the point where things weren't constantly breaking, that we had the ability to keep things up and running. It was also a time for me to start building relationships inside of IT as well as stakeholders in the campus community. That work never ends. There's always more work to be done, but that was really that assessment that we did. That was really the moment when we kicked off that relationship building process with the different constituents on campus. I also focused on staffing. As I said, I was incredibly fortunate in being able to fill positions, bringing on contractors, hiring engineers. And we were really just working on building that competency in the existing environment and starting to think about what needs to be fixed. What are the things that we need to address? Now, fortunately or unfortunately, the answer turned out to be everything. Everything needs to be fixed. And I'll touch more on some of that later, but now 2023 has sort of been our year. This has been our year, and 2024 is going to be great too, because we're now at the point where we can move forward. We've sort of reached a sort of a stasis point on keeping the old environment afloat. And we know where we want to go. And so we are now 2023, we've just been plugging and chugging and really making progress.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mandy. I think it's really insightful how you can see the time and the effort that was really put in to take a look at not only what does it take, but get the right people involved and ensure that, you know, everybody's on the same page before you actually move forward with one of these endeavors. So now let's talk a little bit about getting started and really how did you move towards that future vision for your IAM modernization project?
Okay. So I will say we didn't do a lot of formalized requirements gathering. We didn't produce a ton of documents, but you could argue that the time we spent learning the environment and talking with our stakeholders, it was clear what the requirements were and what people needed. So I spent a ton of time looking at the environment, thinking about our service offerings and how we were offering them, looking at incidents and service requests to see where we were spending most of our time. There were a few things that were low-hanging fruit, but largely these are fundamental problems that just can't be addressed quickly. There's no Band-Aid. It's a big old machine, and a lot of the problems are just caused by various gears slipping and weird interactions between literally hundreds of shell scripts, Perl scripts, cron jobs, you know, the history of time with all of the various engineers who have been in the group. And I should say brilliant engineers, by the way, but they all had their favorite tool sets that they used, and that was what they used. And so now my really excellent engineering staff right now, they need to know a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and admit that they know how to look at Perl scripts and decode what they're actually doing. So we're looking at that environment, and we know we're not going to be able to just fix one of those things without potentially doing more harm than good. And so what that really meant was we were looking at an entire infrastructure build, not fixing what we had, not upgrading what we had, but basically we need to step back. This is the moment, step back and take a look at everything and figure out what we need to do to set ourselves up for success in the future. And so the other thing that we did too as well is, and this is a pretty common thing, that over the years the identity team supported the full stack, the hardware, the OS, everything, the database, all of it. They supported all of it, and so they really didn't have time to laser focus their attention at just the identity stuff. And so that's been part of this journey as well, is shifting those responsibilities out to the teams that do that, so that my team can focus on just the identity tools. So what we decided, of course, is the In-Common Trusted Access platform. We are committed to that, and that we knew that was the direction that we wanted to go. We already have SHIB in our environment. And we knew Midpoint and Grouper were the next steps in our journey. We knew we needed that platform. We don't want a hodgepodge of scripts and database tables and things to make all of this work. We really want a platform that we can design on. So we're depending then on the technical people and the business analysts who understand the needs of the institution. And then me building relationships with management and keeping information flowing and all of our strategic partners. That's really how we're building the requirements, is by keeping all those communication channels flowing. The other thing that I will say, part of what went into why we didn't do a lot of planning is there isn't a whole lot of appetite with senior leadership to spend a lot of time on planning. I know in my years in higher ed, I've been in a ton of projects where we might spend 6, 9, 12 months just planning what we're going to do. And no plan survives first contact with reality, right? And so the stress was really put on move at speed, deliver things quicker, think of things in smaller bites, so that we can actually make progress.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mandy. I think that is right in tune with the whole Agile movement, right? I mean, it's many, many, many years now, but you can see how you bring just that whole methodology into such a large project, and usually the larger, the better, right? I'm sure your topics here really shed some light and probably opened some ears on for other colleges and universities about the variety of things that they need to think about as they're moving forward. So, Mandy, can you tell us a bit about the growth? So how did you and your team really had to change the way that you operated as you move forward with this modernization project?
That is true. So my first point there is just, a couple of highlights on the struggles of IT project management at Purdue. And I'm sure some of this will sound familiar to those in the audience. Generally speaking, we don't have a good intake process for our projects. There's way more projects than there are project managers. So we find ourselves managing a lot of our own projects. And so some of the growth that we had revolved around needing to figure out, how do we manage our own projects internally? How do we make that successful? Another thing is inertia, right? I mean, I think we all live in that world where when your environment is so large and so complicated, it is easy to get paralyzed thinking about the sheer magnitude of change that's required. I mean, like, over my first few years, I started to build a list of, well, first I had to learn what the apps were that we had, right? Because I didn't have any of that information. And so I'm making a list of, oh, we have this app to do this, and this one does that. And I built this list. And as I looked at it, I realized I have to replace all of this. And it's a big list, so just getting past the paralysis sometimes that's a success, to be able to, get past that and move forward. Another thing to get past is perfectionism. And I am a perfectionist. I have many perfectionists on my team. We want things to be awesome. We joke about Unicorn Island, right? I mean, that's this fictitious place that we're all going to live in however many years, and everything is going to be perfect on Unicorn Island. But perfection gets in the way of progress, right? Because every time we think of something new that we want to add on that would be awesome, don't get me wrong, it's all awesome. It takes time, right? And we need to deliver. And so that sort of led us into some agile practices. Now, we are not agile. I know a lot of people call it WAGILE, the combination of waterfall and agile. I don't think we have the environment where we will ever be fully agile. So what we're really trying to do is just to find things that work for us, that make us more productive without introducing a lot of overhead. And I also think this whole waterfall versus agile is a pendulum that swings back and forth. And I'm like, you can find articles all over the internet about how agile wasn't the solution to our problem. Well, there's no magic bullet, right? I mean, there's nothing that you're going to implement that is going to be perfect in every scenario. And so you just have to find what works for your team. My team, we're certainly not there yet. We're still trying to make adjustments in how we do things. But some of the things that we have implemented that have been really helpful for us is we do daily stand-ups because it helps with communication. It helps us hear what everybody is working on. It helps me tune my ear in on, oh, we're stuck on this thing, so we need to figure out how to unblock that work. We're also tracking in Jira, which gives us better visibility into our work. That was something that Unicon introduced to us when we kicked off our projects. And the team really took to it like ducks to water. And so we ended up getting our own cloud instance to manage all the other work as well. And I think that's really working well for us. We are working in sprints, which helps us with that concept of chunking things out in small bites, being able to see progress and pause and look at the progress that we've made. And we're trying to focus on minimum viable product, which is tough for a team of perfectionists, because we joke about things that go in the backlog are phase 2, and phase 2 generally never happens, and so there's this sort of unsatisfying component of, look at all this stuff that we could do, but we really can't. But these processes help us manage it.
Excellent. Thank you, Mandy. I think one of the key things that you hit on here and really should be pointed out is there's so many things to think about, but you have to figure out what's right for you. If it's process, it's the tools and how you're going to move forward. So collaboration and communication are key. So thanks again. Let's talk a little bit about challenges. So what were some of the challenges you faced, and maybe highlight, some of the things that others might not expect?
So the first one, this is our current constant struggle is, we tend to get bogged down in the choices and the decision making, because there's generally multiple ways you can solve a problem. And we like to dig into that. We like to talk about what's the best possible solution. So we do struggle sometimes with the decision making. We struggle with capturing that a decision needs to be made, and then sometimes we struggle with capturing the decision we did make. And sometimes, even if enough time passes, we disagree with the decision that we made 3 months later. So that's been a struggle. We're still not super great at planning, just because there's not a lot of time for it. Our days are really full. We're still being asked to do everybody else's projects in addition to our own projects. And so there isn't, sometimes the planning gets cut. And I really think that is one spot where I think improving that would go a long way in making us a lot more productive. Another challenge that we face is that we don't have dedicated project staff. So we had a PM, they got reallocated to a different project. And so my team basically has been managing the project and doing a fantastic job of it for the last 6 months. But that means then that they're not doing some other duties that they really need to be doing. Another challenge that we face is unrealistic expectations. And I know probably everyone here is nodding their head on that one. I love identity and access management. Probably we all do, right? Here, that's what we're here for. But one of the downsides is, like, almost no one, even seasoned IT people, understand what goes into identity and access management. They just don't get it. They never think about it really. And a lot of the times when people don't understand, they tend to undervalue how complex it is and how much work that it takes. So there's a lot of misunderstanding there. What we end up with sometimes then is the people who have managed environments who didn't really know a whole lot about identity management. They tend to focus on getting things in, but they never think about getting things out, provision. Oh, well, we'll figure out deprovisioning later. How many of us have looked at Active Directory or another environment and died a little inside when we saw, oh my gosh, look at all this junk that's in there. Dealing with those unrealistic expectations is a challenge. So a funny story from many years ago. Someone in senior leadership came and asked me, and I gave them an answer about, hey, that's going to be complex. It can be done, but it's going to take time. Well, he didn't like that answer. And so he worked his way through my staff and asked each of them what the answer was. And by the time he got to the last person, his response was, well, I see Mandy coached you on what to say. But I think we all deal with that, right? Because people just think it's IT. You open the box, you push the button and it works, right? Even though they know in their space, that's not how it works, but they don't understand our space. And so they don't really think about what it actually takes to make this stuff work. So it's a constant battle to try to inform people who don't care to learn what any given change will actually take to make it work and what a realistic timeline actually looks like. And then the last challenge I'll mention is remote work. A lot of employees love it. It's tough for management, morale can be challenging face to face. It's even more challenging when you are remote and you don't have that interaction, and oftentimes you don't have the body language to go off of to figure out if someone is struggling or not. So I have spent a lot of time thinking about how to make sure that the environment is as positive and productive as it can be. So I'm not all business all the time. Like I will have people say, we just had a half-hour meeting with everyone on the team and we really didn't do anything. That's a very expensive meeting. Oh, no. We didn't not do anything. Oh, that was a bad double negative. We did something. There was a purpose for that meeting. And the purpose was just to hear each other's voices, to tell each other jokes, to pick on each other. We just talked about this morning in my team. We have something called mutiny, which is where my staff mutes me in the middle of meetings. And then we all laugh about it. I build up a head of steam and I'm talking and boom, somebody mutes me. And it takes me a couple of seconds to realize it. And then we just stop and laugh, because the alternative to, you either laugh or, you cry or scream, right? So we're trying to keep it positive. But it does take a lot of emotional intelligence to maintain a well-functioning, fully remote team. It is hard. But I am blessed to have a team of people who have mad technical skills, who love problem solving, and they love making things better by working together. So I am really blessed.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing. And you can tell you really enjoy what you do. And you obviously have an awesome team. I also wanted to make another note. I mean, it's so important to talk about challenges, because, we all have to deal with them and they come up. But for you to provide this insight and to really share it's awesome. So I hope everybody is taking some notes of, just some things and some guidance that you can use as you move forward with your IAM, modernization. Now let's get excited. Mandy, we would love to hear about your successes, your celebrations.
So survival, That is a measure of success. So we have had some tough times, but we have worked our way through countless situations where we didn't know anything about how to fix the problem, but together we were able to solve those problems. So that's the first measure of success for me. I had someone on my team, I shared with them the link to this presentation. I said, feel free to join. It's not required, it's optional. And the response was, Purdue success story. Does that mean we're done? No, we're not done, but we have had a lot of successes. And so one of our most recent success stories is we deployed a brand new single sign-on environment. So our legacy environment was, I mentioned SHIB earlier. We also support the CAS protocol. It like everything else, it was old, outdated, very customized, used Duo as a second factor in a very quirky, bizarre, hard to support way. And so basically that was our first project that we worked together with Unicon to basically design the new environment, get it rolled out. We went live at the end of June. And the measure of success there is we had prepared for 4 weeks of aftercare with the service desks. After 2 days, they said, yeah, we're good. We don't need to meet anymore. This is fine, So I mean, that right there, huge success when you go from the login experience being the #1 call to the service desk to having the service desk say, "Now we're good. We don't need you to help us through this anymore. We got this. We got it covered." And at the start of this semester, if you ignore the Duo outage, our single sign-on was not the #1 issue. And in the past, it had always been the #1 issue to the service desk. There is still a lot of work to be done with our single sign-on environment because we did focus on minimum viable product, but it was still significant what we were able to accomplish. And the large majority of the work was done in 6 months. So if you had said to me a couple years ago that we would redeploy single sign-on in 6 months, I would have said, you're crazy. But it went really, really well with no drama. And so you really can't ask for anything better. The other thing about success is, and this is more toward communicating up with executive directors, it's about showing progress. It's not always about completing big projects. It's about finding the things that can be improved, that you can sell, so to speak, to the community, and making sure that you're delivering those things repeatedly over time. So you're building up that credibility with everyone to say, yeah, this team really delivers. And some of those things are technical, but some of them are just process and procedural things where you say, ooh, we don't have a really good standard for granting domain admin access in our Active Directory environment. You know what? We can say what the standard is. Let's write the standard and let's implement it. That's a real example of something that we're working on right now. We're also assisting a lot of teams with their projects, and that goes along with the relationship building of demonstrating to others that we are team players and that we are there to help them. And that is a success when you can say that you've turned the reputation of a team basically in a 180, where they were the group that no one wanted to work with because understandably they were short-staffed and overburdened and very cranky when all of these people asked them for things, to where now, like, we may not be delivering everything that people want, but we're super nice about it and they love us for it. So that is a success too. So it's not always about delivering product to people. We also have been really successful in getting our ticket numbers down, and some of that has to do with being able to get more personnel to deal with it, but it also has to do with taking a look at the entire environment and figuring out where are the pain points and how do we fix some of these things. We're the team that people want to work with now, and so that reputational growth is just as important as anything else.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. Wow, this is an immense amount of success. Could there be more? What does the future look like for Purdue University? Tell us, share.
There's always more, right? It never ends. It's not a project, it's a career, right?
Love it.
Yeah, so our midpoint and grouper implementations kicked off, I think it was 2 weeks ago. And I asked the team a while back, I said, do we want to try to do these at the same time, or should we pick one and then the other? And they're like, no, let's do them both. So here we are. So we're deploying containers, we're building the environment, we're starting to configure. We'll be looking at connections to our different systems of record. And the goal is these are platforms for us to tear down the Rube Goldberg machine. And so that's really what we're focusing on is this is the infrastructure that we will use to build the rest of the future. So there's a ton more to come, and this is just the beginning. And Charisse and I have talked about, what successes could we talk about next year?
Excellent. Oh my gosh, thank you so much for sharing. This is fabulous, the amount of things that you've done. Wonderful. Thank you, Mandy.
You're welcome.
I think at this point, I will go ahead and stop sharing, and April's going to take over, and then we'll shift over to questions.
Sure, Therese. Thank you. Thank you to you both for such a great presentation. We have a number of questions, and I'm going to bundle some of these for you just to make sure we can get to as many as we can. And some folks have posed multiple questions. So let's just get started. So, Mandy, there are a number of questions I'm going to bundle together that have to do with how you handled staffing. So Michael asked, how many contract engineers were hired? I think you had mentioned that during the presentation.
Yeah, so at the beginning, there was a mad scramble, and we had, at one point in time, we had 4 contract engineers. We are now down to really 1 staff aug. All the rest of the work is project work that we're doing. So we just have 1 contractor right now, and really it was like I said, it was a mad scramble at the beginning where we just had to figure out what are the skill sets that we need to just cope with the things that are, because we all know when people leave, we find out the ugly little secrets of, oh, this guy was running this script manually every day and no one's been running that script for a while. So I think our max was 4, and I had a lot of people from IT pitch in and help me. So I was really fortunate there as well. But we were able to then staff that down as I built up the rest of my full-time staff.
Excellent. And so along similar lines, Jeff asked, how many users are managed by your IAM group and how many FTEs are dedicated to this? Do you have any staffing single points of failure?
I have a lot of staffing single points of failure. Fewer than I used to have. So when in May of 2020, when we reorged and consolidated the identity groups, and I use that term loosely because only the main campus had a devoted identity team. The rest were 10% duties as assigned from the regional campus. So you had a sysadmin here or a DBA there or a web developer. We did assume all responsibilities, but with a little asterisk. There's a little bit there that we don't support, but we assumed all of the identity responsibilities for the entire system, including Purdue Global now and Purdue Indy, which is a new thing that's coming. So today I have, so we manage about, I would say, 100 to 120,000 active identities for the entire system. And I have 5 full-time engineers, 1 contract engineer, 5 analysts who basically function as tier 1 for identity. And I have 2 business analysts. So that was a huge growth. And again, never waste a good crisis. I not only got to fill positions, I got to create positions. And I'm not letting them go.
Okay, and along similar lines, and I think you addressed this some, but specifically Jeremy's asking, how do you split your team up between focusing on break-fix work versus project-based work?
You guys are asking such hard questions. That one's tough, right? Because the project staff and the operations staff are the same people. So what we try to do, because I was able to add 2 analysts, we have tried to push all of the ticket work to the analysts so that only the really tough stuff gets escalated to the engineers. But it's hard. And so I would say we use Jira a lot for that. If we have tickets that come in that are going to take more than an hour to do, we do duplicate the entry in Jira. We use Team Dynamics for our incident management software, but I want to keep track of what everyone is working on, and I want to understand that they are working on what's priority. And so that's really what we focus on, is just the never-ending constant shift and changes in priorities. And like we all know, the last 3 months just got blown out of the water for us because tail end of summer, everybody remembered all the projects that they were supposed to have done by the end of the summer. And then the start of the semester, you can't plan for anything. And so it is just a constant balancing act of what's important and getting buy-in from leadership of, I'm going to defer and deny as much as I can, because although every single one of these requests seems small to the person who's asking for it, they add up, and identity is at the center of everything, and everyone is asking us for their thing, and I can't deliver it all.
Understandably, right? That's the constant challenge. Couple more organizational ones, and then I see quite a number of technical questions, and we'll try to get as many of those as we can, or we may have to have Mandy write some responses offline, because again, some of them may be a bit more than what we can address. Lots of questions about SHIB and midpoint and what have you. Martin asked, could you share more about your organizational structure and what services your team is responsible for at Purdue?
Sure. So org structure has changed a lot, and it's caused a lot of chaos over the last few years. I mentioned my group, so the security and identity functions, as well as the infrastructure groups, so OS support, virtualization, things like that, from the regional campuses were consolidated into central IT at the main West Lafayette campus. So that in itself was a huge organizational shift. The next shift happened this past April, where all IT groups at Purdue were consolidated into one Purdue IT group. So where there were 20 some academic IT groups and a regional IT group for the Fort Wayne and the Northwest campuses, those were all consolidated into one large organization. And we're still figuring out what that means. There's a lot of identity work that is still happening out there, right? With that many different groups doing their own thing for so long, they are still supporting a lot of that. And we're trying to partner with them from the standpoint of, I don't have the staffing to take that over, but if I understand what you are trying to accomplish, I can make sure that what I build in the future lets us do all of that better, faster, more consistently. My team is responsible for supporting the directory services environment. So several Active Directory environments, many open LDAP environments, Radius. There's still some that exists out there spread around, but largely most of that is in my team. Of course, we manage authentication. We're responsible for account provisioning, deprovisioning, a lot of the access management, but a lot of that too is spread out all over. A lot of that is the Wild West. And my team is also responsible for issuing SSL certs. So I think that covers the big stuff that we're responsible for.
Excellent. And one last question along organizational lines. You had talked about reputation in your presentation. And so Stephen's asking, what did you do or what strategies did you implement that help shift the negative perception of the identity and access management service so that you could improve or enhance the reputation?
Yeah. So I am a natural born communicator and mediator. And humor is one of the things that I use to build relationships with people. I, so to speak, grew up at the service desk. I started as a student worker at the help desk at the Fort Wayne campus. And so the first thing we learned is you're not really there to fix their technical problem. You're there to listen to them and understand that they have a problem and that you get where they're coming from. And that's how I approach everything. I'm not trying to solve everybody's problems. I'm just trying to listen, to let them know that I understand that there are a lot of problems and we can make them better together. So it's really just about listening, inviting people for conversations. I should have mentioned this in the presentation. One of our great successes is we have what's called our Identity IT Partners group, which is a monthly group. Actually, our next one is on Friday, where we have probably 50 people in attendance every month, where they just come and listen to us talk about what we've got going on. We take solicitations for being in focus groups for them to share with us what they're struggling with. And that's been super successful to the point where others have actually mimicked that strategy and done their own.
Yeah,
It takes work. It's work that a lot of times people don't recognize that it takes that much effort.
okay. Let's get into some questions regarding SHIB.
I hope they're not too technical. I'm not.
I know some of these, yeah, like I said, if anything is in that falls into that neighborhood, we'll let people know that we can farm that question out. So feel free to say pass, Mandy, and I'll try to organize these for you. So do you have a single sign-on, a single SSO through Shibboleth, or do you have other login sites through ADFS Azure also? Okay.
Yes. So the vast majority of our single sign-on has SHIB. We're adding OIDC plus Duo. That's the vast majority. We also have our M365 environment, we are using Microsoft MFA for that. We did not put that behind CAS and SHIB just for a variety of reasons.
Okay.
And then we also do some Azure integrations as well.
Okay. All right. And I think in saying that you didn't funnel them behind CAS, you're asking another question. Somebody was asking if you have experience with that, but I hear that was, you decided not to do that, correct?
For Microsoft?
Oh, or sorry, for everything. So somebody, Winston is saying that they have multiple SSOs and they want to, because of Microsoft portals, and they want to funnel them all behind CAS or SHIB, and wondering if you have any experience doing it that way.
We do have that happening at the Fort Wayne campus. So
Okay.
Fort Wayne maintains kind of a separate identity space, their own SSO. It's one of those little asterisks where my team does not manage that, but they do have Microsoft behind CAS. So there are people who do know that, how to do that.
Okay, excellent. Both of these next questions, they're specific to some of the solutions, but have to do with your selection process, if you can talk about that, Mandy. So Nick asked about, beyond having SHIB in your environment already, can you share some more of the reasons why you chose the In Common platform over other options?
So part of it was, so I remember probably 10, 12, maybe more years ago, seeing demos of Grouper and Midpoint and thinking, oh my gosh, if I had a team of people, that is what I would implement. And at the time, there wasn't an identity team at Fort Wayne. It was me and a couple of other people that shared the duties. So there's that little bit of just the history of seeing what is possible and thinking that would solve so many of our problems. The prior team before I started did also do a business case where they did some comparisons of different options and did end up on the Midpoint and Grouper solutions as well, just because we knew, we're members, we're committed to it, we like the concept, we like being part of that community. And honestly, it's meant to work for us, where a lot of these other solutions don't, and my former boss had a lot of conversations with CISOs at other institutions, and what are you using? What do you have? Does that fix all of your problems? And they're like, no, insert brand name here does not solve all of our problems. And so, for us, all roads just pointed toward this is really where we want to be at.
Excellent. And so along those lines with that business case, Mandy, so again, during that selection process, did you have any difficulty convincing leadership on your strategic move to select Midpoint, for example, over a commercial solution, or like Okta or SailPoint or something of that nature?
Honestly, I didn't get any resistance at all. And I think part of that was just, that demotivational poster with the iceberg, and it says it could be that you just exist to be an example to others. I sort of feel like that's me. Of things had gotten to the point where they were just so terrible that people were like, I don't care what you do, just fix it. So I between that and I would say building the reputational credibility, really just eased us right into, yeah, Mandy, just go ahead and fix it.
Excellent. Back to your point about not wasting a good crisis, right?
Right.
So in reference to SHIB, a couple of questions here about what SSO solution replaced the legacy Shibboleth IDP, and whether or not you replaced it with something else like Entra ID or an upgrade.
No, so we just went from we ran CAS and SHIB. Now we're running modern versions of SHIB and supporting the CAS protocol through SHIB. So we still have it. It's just much newer. We're actually deploying it in a modern way. Lots of good stuff in there that we just never had before, even though it's still, the same or very similar technologies that we put in place.
Okay. And specifically, Paul is asking whether or not your deployment of SHIB was a container deployment.
Sure was. It was our first foray into Kubernetes. So that was a journey, big learning experience for us. We now have 2 people in training this week for DevOps. So you would say we kind of put the cart before the horse, didn't do the training first. Now we're doing the training, but yeah, that we knew that was the direction that we wanted to go, and that this was going to be the project that would give us the opportunity to learn it with Unicon's help.
And so these next couple of questions I'm going to bundle have to do with the cloud. Are you using cloud hosting? If not, what were your top reasons for not using cloud? And along with that, a moment here. Are you running your container environment on-prem, in a cloud provider, or both?
So we are on-prem today. Very early on, we had conversations about where are we going to do this. And we involved different teams outside of identity to talk through that. And the general thinking was, we felt like we would be safer deploying it on-prem initially, and then we would reevaluate over time. And so we're coming up soon here on a reevaluation point to say, are we staying on-prem or are we moving to the cloud? We did try to make all the right decisions to say that if we decided we were going to the cloud, that we would be able to do that relatively easily. Haha, in this environment, there's never anything that is actually easy. But yeah, right now we are on-prem. I would not be surprised if at some point in the future, yeah, 100% we're going to be in the cloud.
Excellent. All right. So with our time running down, we probably have time for a couple more questions. And apologies if we didn't get an opportunity to answer your question live. There were many of them, as is the case when we have such an engaging topic. But we will get a report of all of your questions and see if we can't work offline to get folks some answers. Having said that, one of the questions is, if you had to redo this work over again, what would you choose or do differently, if anything?
Honestly, I don't know that I would do anything differently. I view everything as an opportunity to learn, good or bad. And we've really tried to include continuous improvement in what we do, and to stop and have a safe enough space to say, did we make a mistake? Do we need to pivot? Do we need to change what we're doing? So at every single opportunity it was something to learn. Sure, we made mistakes along the way. Nothing glaring comes to mind, but it's really just about figuring out, what do we do? Do we keep going, or do we turn? And that's really what I would advise, is just stop every now and then. That's why we like the sprints. Stop every now and then to think about, is this working? And if it's not working, change something.
All right, excellent. And so this will be our last question. Well, actually, I'll do 2 very quickly. Couple of questions about whether or not you considered co-manage, Mandy.
It's out there. It's on the backlog, but it's not something that we're looking at right now.
Okay, thank you. for those of you who had that question. And so our final question before I close this out, in terms of the broad picture, what do you think is the biggest challenge facing your team over the next 5 years? Is it a post-deployment? Like, what's on your radar?
So I would say the biggest challenge that I can foresee is trying to figure out how to do what we want to do, but still meet the external expectations on us. You know, I mentioned earlier unrealistic expectations, and it doesn't matter how many times I say, you do realize replacing an identity governance system is the same amount of work as replacing an ERP solution. That is not something that you do in 12 months. And again, people don't get what we do, and so they don't understand that. And so I would say probably the biggest thing we struggle with is figuring out how to feed people the information that they need to hear so that we can continue working on the things that we know are important for the institution.
100%. Thank you so much for addressing as many of our attendees' questions as we were able to in this time. Very briefly, just to close this out, many thanks to both Mandy and Charisse for a fabulous presentation, and to everybody who attended, whether you posed questions or were just listened in. And also special thanks to Susan and the rest of our Internet 2 Meetings team for helping us bring you this webinar series each and every month. Again, the event was recorded, so folks will receive the slides and the recording via email. They'll also be posted to our website. There is a quick 4-question survey as you leave. We value your feedback if you'd like to provide it. But I also like to just make you aware, we have multiple calls to action out to the community at this moment. And so I just want to remind you about those. We have the INCOM and cybersecurity exercise coming up. We also have our call for nominations for INCOM and advisory committees, which is now extended through October 13th. And by now, many of you should have seen, and some of you hopefully responded to the INCOM and Futures 2 Needs Assessment Survey. So just a quick reminder about those calls to action we currently have out to the community. We thank you again for joining us. We will see you in October for another IAM Online webinar. Have a great rest of the day.